I took the night security job because it paid a little more than day shift, and because I needed the money fast. The building I was assigned to guard was an old corporate office complex on the outskirts of town, half empty after a company downsized. My shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. By midnight, the place felt abandoned. Most of the lights were dimmed to save electricity, and the only consistent sound was the low hum of the ventilation system. Outside, the parking lot lights cast long, uneven shadows that barely moved unless the wind picked up. My responsibilities were simple: monitor the security cameras, log any activity, and walk the building once every hour. It was boring work, but I told myself boredom was better than danger. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. My rounds were quiet, the cameras showed empty hallways, and the nights blended together. Time moved differently during those shifts. Minutes dragged, then suddenly hours vanished. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, exhaustion would creep in, making my thoughts feel sluggish and my reactions slower. Coffee stopped helping after a while. I spent most nights staring at the monitors, scrolling my phone and counting the minutes until sunrise. The building had 3 floors, but only the first floor was still in use. The second and third floors had been closed off months earlier. According to management, no one had access to them except maintenance, and even they only came during the day. One night, a little after 2:30 a.m., something changed. I noticed a brief flicker on one of the camera feeds. It was the third-floor hallway camera. At first, I assumed it was another technical glitch. Those cameras were old, and the wiring hadn't been updated in years. I watched the screen for a few seconds, expecting the image to stabilize. Instead, I saw movement. It wasn't fast enough to trigger the motion alert, just a slow shape passing through the frame. My stomach tightened. The hallway wasn't supposed to have any movement at all. I rewound the footage and watched it again. The shape crossed the hallway and disappeared around a corner, just out of view. I checked the access logs immediately. No badge swipes, no door entries, nothing. According to the system, the third floor had remained untouched all night. I tried to convince myself it was a shadow or a reflection, but the more I watched the footage, the less believable that explanation felt. The shape had weight to it. It moved with purpose. Protocol required me to investigate any unexplained activity, even on closed floors. I hesitated longer than I should have, staring at the screen and hoping something else would happen that would explain it away. Nothing did. Eventually, I grabbed my flashlight, clipped my radio to my belt, and headed for the stairwell. The stairwell was colder than the rest of the building, and the air smelled faintly of dust and old paint. Each step echoed loudly, making me painfully aware of how alone I was. When I reached the third floor, the lights were off just like they were supposed to be. I flipped the switch at the end of the hallway. A few bulbs flickered to life, while others stayed dark. The hallway stretched longer than it appeared on the cameras, lined with closed office doors on both sides. I walked slowly, checking each door handle as I passed. All were locked. Halfway down the hall, I noticed one door slightly ajar. It stood out immediately, like a mistake in a perfect pattern. I stopped in front of the open door and listened. The building was silent. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint hum of the lights. I pushed the door open with my flashlight raised. Inside was an empty office, stripped bare except for dusty carpet and a few abandoned cables near the wall. Nothing looked disturbed, but the air felt stale, heavier than it should have been. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the floor near the doorway. Footprints, fresh ones. They weren't dusty impressions from months ago. They were clear, as if someone had walked through recently. My heart started pounding, and I backed into the hallway. That's when the lights behind me went out. Not all at once, just the section of the hallway I had already walked through. The bulbs ahead of me stayed on, casting long shadows toward the dark end of the hall. I told myself it was faulty wiring, but my body didn't believe it. I started walking back toward the stairwell, my flashlight beam shaking slightly with each step. About 10 feet from the stairwell door, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, each step deliberate, matching my pace. Whoever it was wasn't trying to hide. They weren't running, they were following. I didn't turn around. Every instinct told me not to. I reached the stairwell door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The footsteps stopped the moment the door closed behind me. I stood there for a full minute, listening, waiting to hear the door open again. It never did. When I returned to the lobby, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my flashlight. I checked the monitors again. The third-floor hallway was empty. No movement, no sign of anyone. I finished my shift without leaving the desk again. When morning came, I told my supervisor what happened. He listened, nodded, and said the cameras had been glitchy lately. Over the next few weeks, similar things happened. Movement on cameras where there shouldn't have been any. Doors unlocked that I knew I had checked. Lights turning off on their own. Each time there was a reasonable explanation offered. Old wiring, faulty locks, system errors. But the explanations never lined up with what I saw. One night, I heard footsteps above the lobby ceiling, pacing back and forth for nearly 10 minutes. The cameras showed nothing. I stopped making rounds on the upper floors after that. I stayed at the desk, watching the monitors and waiting for my shift to end. The final incident happened just before I quit. Around 3 in the morning, the third-floor camera feed went completely black. Not static, just darkness. I reported it immediately. While waiting for instructions, I noticed something reflected in the black screen. A shape, a silhouette, standing where the camera should have been looking at. It didn't move, it just stood there, facing the lens. I stared at it until my eyes started to ache. Then, the feed came back on, and the hallway was empty again. No shadow, no figure, nothing. I didn't go back upstairs that night. I didn't need to. The next day, I turned in my uniform and quit without giving notice. Management didn't argue. They didn't even ask why. Sometimes I wonder if they already knew something they weren't telling me. I still think about that building when I drive by it late at night. The parking lot is empty now. The lights are off. But every once in a while, I catch myself looking at the dark windows, half expecting to see movement where there shouldn't be any.
Overnight shift at a gas station just off a highway exit that didn't see much traffic after midnight. My hours were 10 at night until 6 in the morning, 5 nights a week. During the day, the place was busy enough to feel normal, but at night it felt isolated, like it existed outside of everything else. The station sat between a stretch of forest and a long, empty road. After midnight, cars became rare, and by 2 in the morning, it was usually just me, the humming coolers, and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. My routine never changed. I cleaned the counters, restocked shelves, and watched the road through the front windows while fighting off exhaustion. There was something about that time of night that made everything feel unreal. The world seemed quieter, thinner somehow. Sounds carried farther, and small movements caught your attention more than they should have. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, fog would often roll in from the nearby woods, thick enough to blur the outlines of the pumps outside. I hated those nights. The fog pressed against the windows, swallowing the road and making it feel like the station was floating in nothingness. Still, nothing ever happened at first. Customers came and went, the hours passed slowly. That's why the night it started felt so wrong almost immediately. It was just before 2 in the morning when the front door opened without triggering the usual bell. I looked up from behind the counter, expecting to see a customer, but the door had already closed. A man stood near the drink coolers facing away from me. He hadn't made a sound. I waited a second, then asked if he needed help. He didn't respond. I asked again, louder this time. Still nothing. At first, I assumed he hadn't heard me, but then I noticed how still he was. He wasn't browsing or reading labels. He was just standing there, facing the glass doors of the cooler. When he finally moved, it was slow and deliberate. He turned only his head, not his body, and looked straight at me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I immediately felt uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. There was nothing visibly wrong with him. He looked normal, middle-aged, clean clothes, no visible injuries, but his stare was intense and unblinking. We stood like that for several seconds. I remember becoming very aware of the sound of my own breathing. Eventually, he turned back toward the coolers, took one step, then stopped. Without picking up anything, he walked toward the door and left. I watched him through the front windows as he stepped outside. Instead of heading toward a car, he stopped near one of the pumps and stood there, facing the store. The The fog outside was thick, swirling around his legs. I waited for him to move, but he didn't. After a minute or two, I locked the front door. Something about the way he stood there made my skin crawl. He didn't pace, he didn't check his phone, he didn't smoke. He just stared at the building. I picked up the phone behind the counter, considering calling my manager, but I kept watching him instead. He stayed there for nearly 20 minutes. The fog grew thicker, slowly obscuring his outline. At one point, I looked down to check the time. When I looked back up, he was gone. No sound, no movement, no car pulling away, just empty pumps and fog. I unlocked the door again and finished my shift, telling myself he was just another strange person passing through. But I didn't shake the feeling that something about the encounter hadn't followed normal rules. Before leaving that morning, I checked the security footage out of curiosity. I wanted to see if I had missed something. When I scrubbed back to the time he supposedly entered the store, my stomach dropped. The doors never opened. The bell never rang. According to the footage, no one had entered the store during that time. The camera showed me looking up, speaking to empty space, reacting to nothing at all. I watched it 3 times, convinced I had the wrong timestamp. I didn't. There was no sign of the man anywhere on the footage. I didn't tell anyone right away. I convinced myself the camera system had glitched. Old hardware, bad angles, anything. Over the next week, I worked my shifts as usual, trying to forget about it. Then it happened again. Same time, same fog, same man. He appeared near the coolers, stood silently, and left without buying anything. Once again, the footage showed nothing. I started feeling dread whenever the fog rolled in. I caught myself watching the front door constantly, bracing for it to open silently. The third time was the worst. He didn't stand by the coolers. He stood directly in front of the counter, just a few feet away. I could see his face clearly. I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the way his mouth was set in a neutral expression. I asked him what he wanted. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening, then turned and walked out. I locked the door immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key. I didn't check the footage that night. I already knew what it would show. A few mornings later, when I came in to start my shift, I found muddy footprints behind the counter. They led from the front door to where I usually stood and then stopped. There were no prints leading back out. I stared at them for a long time, trying to figure out how that was possible. The floor behind the counter wasn't accessible to customers. I was the only one with the key to the gate. When I showed my manager, he shrugged and said someone must have tracked mud in earlier. He didn't look at the prints very closely. That was my last week working nights. I finished my shifts, handed in my notice, and never went back. I still drive past that exit sometimes during the day. The station looks normal, busy even. But whenever I pass it at night and see fog gathering around the pumps, I feel that same tightness in my chest. I don't know who or what I was seeing during those shifts. All I know is that I was awake, sober, and paying attention, and whatever stood in that store with me wasn't supposed to be there.
I worked nights at a distribution warehouse that supplied grocery stores across the state. The building was massive, stretching farther than you could see from any one spot inside. During the day, it was loud and chaotic, forklifts moving constantly and people shouting over each other. At night, it was the opposite. The overnight crew was small, maybe 8 or 9 people total, spread across different sections. My shift ran from midnight until 8 in the morning. I handled inventory checks, scanning pallets and logging discrepancies. Most of the warehouse lights were dimmed overnight, leaving long shadows between the aisles. It was never fully dark, but it was dark enough to make you feel isolated, even when other people were technically nearby. The nights blurred together quickly. The work was repetitive and physically draining, which made time feel distorted. Some hours dragged on forever, while others disappeared without warning. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion hit hardest. Your body wanted to shut down, but your mind stayed alert, constantly scanning for movement in the shadows. I'd learned early on not to play music or wear headphones. Sounds mattered in a place like that. You needed to hear forklifts, alarms, or someone calling out. It also helped me feel less alone. The warehouse had a way of swallowing sound, though. Footsteps echoed strangely, and noises often came from directions that didn't make sense. One night, while scanning a pallet near the back of the building, I heard a familiar beep behind me. It was the sound of a barcode scanner. Short, sharp, electronic. I assumed it was one of my coworkers, so I didn't turn around right away. I finished scanning the box I was holding and then glanced over my shoulder. The aisle behind me was empty. No forklift, no person, just rows of shelves disappearing into shadow. I shrugged it off and went back to work. A few seconds later, I heard the beep again. Same sound, same distance. This time, I turned immediately. Still nothing. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice echoed down the aisle and faded. No one answered. I checked my radio, thinking maybe someone was trying to get my attention, but it was silent. The scanner beeped again, closer this time. My stomach tightened. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was pressing the trigger on a scanner. Slowly, I stepped to the end of the aisle and looked down the next row. The lights were dimmer there, and the shelves cast long, uneven shadows across the floor. I didn't see anyone, but I could feel that I wasn't alone. I followed the sound, aisle by aisle, deeper into the warehouse. Each time I heard the beep, it came from just ahead of me, always far enough away that I couldn't see the source. After a few minutes, I realized I'd wandered into a section we weren't scheduled to work that night. I stopped walking. Something felt off. I checked my radio again and called my supervisor, telling him where I was. There was a pause on the other end before he responded. When he spoke, his voice sounded tense. He told me to stop moving and stay exactly where I was. I asked him why. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he repeated himself, telling me not to go any farther. He said that section had been closed for the night. I looked around, confused. There were no signs, no barriers. It looked exactly like every other part of the warehouse. I asked if someone else was assigned to inventory there. He said no. I told him I kept hearing a scanner. The radio crackled with static before he responded. He told me to walk back toward the main floor, slowly, and to keep the radio on. As I turned to leave, I heard the scanner beep one last time, directly behind me. I didn't turn around. I walked back toward the brighter lights as calmly as I could manage, every muscle in my body tense. When I reached the main floor, my supervisor met me near the loading docks. He didn't ask what I saw. He didn't even ask what happened. He just told me to take a break. Later that night, I asked him what was going on with that section. He hesitated before telling me that a former employee had been fired months earlier and banned from the property. Apparently, the man had been caught sleeping inside the warehouse after hours, hiding among the shelves. Security escorted him out, but they never found where he'd been staying. After that night, I started noticing small things. Boxes shifted slightly out of place. Inventory counts didn't line up. Empty food wrappers appeared in areas no one was assigned to. When I mentioned it, management brushed it off. They said miscounts were normal and that rodents sometimes dragged trash around. But rodents don't move pallets or leave wrappers neatly folded. One night, I found a blanket tucked behind a stack of boxes in the closed section. It looked recently used. I reported it. Nothing was done. The warehouse began to feel different after that. Every shadow looked deeper. Every unexpected noise made me jump. I started working closer to other people, even if it meant slowing down. I caught glimpses of movement at the ends of aisles, only for it to disappear when I looked directly at it. Once, I thought I saw someone standing between the shelves, watching me. When I blinked, they were gone. I stopped staying late to finish tasks. As soon as my shift ended, I left. The final incident happened near the end of my time there. I was scanning a box in a well-lit area when I noticed something inside it that didn't belong. It was a folded piece of paper. I opened it, expecting a packing slip. Instead, it was a handwritten note. The words were simple and uneven, like they'd been written in a hurry. I know when you're alone. I felt cold all over. I checked the box number. According to the system, it hadn't been opened since it arrived at the warehouse weeks earlier. I reported the note immediately. Management took it seriously this time, at least on the surface. Security increased patrols, and we were told to work in pairs whenever possible. Nothing else happened after that, but the damage was already done. I couldn't focus. Every shift felt like I was being watched. I quit not long after. The warehouse still operates, and as far as I know, nothing major has happened since. But sometimes, when I think about that place late at night, I wonder if whoever was hiding there ever really left.
Week. During the day, the hospital was loud and crowded, but at night it became a completely different place. The hallways emptied, voices faded, and the building settled into a low, constant hum of machines and distant alarms. Most of my work involved cleaning floors, emptying trash, and sanitizing waiting areas. It was repetitive, quiet work, and most nights passed without incident. The hospital had several wings, but one of them had been closed for renovations, and staff were told not to go inside unless authorized. The closed wing was separated from the rest of the hospital by a set of heavy doors that were usually locked. The lights inside were turned off, and the hallway beyond them disappeared into darkness. I had no reason to go there, and I didn't want to. There was something about that section of the building that felt colder, even from a distance. Still, part of my nightly routine involved cleaning the main hallway near the entrance to that wing. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, the hospital was at its quietest. Even the emergency department slowed down. Those were the hours when exhaustion hit hardest and your mind started playing tricks on you. One night, while mopping the floor near the closed wing, I heard a door open behind me. The sound was soft but distinct. I turned around expecting to see a nurse or another janitor. Instead, I saw a man standing a few feet away in the hallway. He was wearing hospital scrubs, but they looked faded, like they hadn't been replaced in years. He appeared tired, the kind of tired you see in people who work long hours. He looked at me and asked calmly if I could tell him how to get back to his department. His voice was steady, not panicked or confused. I told him he needed to head back toward the main corridors and that the wing behind him was closed. He nodded, thanked me, and started walking in the direction I pointed. I turned back to my work, assuming that was the end of it. A few seconds later, I realized I didn't hear his footsteps anymore. I looked up and saw him turning into the closed wing instead. I called out to him, telling him again that the area was off limits. He didn't respond. I followed him to the doorway, but when I looked inside, the hallway was empty. The lights were still off, the doors along the walls were all closed. I stood there longer than I should have, staring into the dark hallway. I told myself he had moved faster than I expected, or that I had lost track of him in the shadows. Eventually, I returned to my work and finished the shift without thinking too much about it. Hospitals were full of strange encounters, especially at night. People got lost all the time. But over the next few weeks, it happened again. The same man, same scrubs, same tired expression. Each time he asked for directions, each time he walked into the closed wing and disappeared before I could stop him. I mentioned it casually to one of the nurses during a break, describing the man and asking if she recognized him. She laughed and said I was probably just tired. She told me no staff were assigned to that wing anymore and that no one should have been wearing scrubs like the ones I described. I tried to let it go, but I became more alert during my shifts. I paid attention to every sound, every movement. I started avoiding the hallway near the closed wing whenever possible. Still, the encounters continued, spaced out just enough that I questioned whether they were even real. The third time I saw him, he stood closer than before, near one of the nurses' stations. I could see details I hadn't noticed earlier, the stitching on his scrubs, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he spoke. He asked for directions again, his voice quiet and flat. I answered him automatically, even though my heart was pounding. As soon as he turned away, I watched him closely. He walked normally, his footsteps audible against the floor. When he reached the closed wing, he turned the corner and vanished. I ran after him this time, but the hallway was empty when I arrived. I checked the doors, all locked. No stairwells nearby, no side exits. There was nowhere he could have gone. I stood there, listening, waiting to hear something, anything,
but the hospital remained quiet. I reported the incident to my supervisor later that night. He listened politely but didn't seem concerned. He told me night shifts were hard on people and suggested I get more rest during the day. I stopped bringing it up after that. A month later, while cleaning a storage area near maintenance, I noticed an old bulletin board covered in outdated notices and staff photos. Some of the photos were faded and curling at the edges. I didn't pay much attention until one image caught my eye. It was a group photo of hospital staff from years earlier. One of the men in the photo looked familiar, too familiar. He was wearing the same style of scrubs I had been seeing, same face, same tired eyes. Under the photo was a small plaque with names and dates. I recognized his name immediately. Next to it was a date and a brief note indicating he had died in a workplace accident during an overnight shift. I stared at that board for a long time, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. People can look alike, memories can be unreliable, especially when you're exhausted, but the resemblance was too strong to ignore. I asked maintenance about the board, and one of the workers told me the man had been killed years ago when part of the closed wing was still operational. After the accident, that section of the hospital was slowly shut down. I didn't tell him why I was asking. After that, I stopped seeing the man altogether, but the feeling of unease never went away. I finished out my schedule and requested a transfer to day shift. Walking through the hospital in daylight felt completely different. The hallways were busy, the lights bright, the sounds familiar. Nothing felt out of place. Still, every now and then, when I work late or pass by that closed wing, I feel the same cold awareness I felt during those night shifts. I don't know what I encountered during those hours, and I don't try to explain it anymore. I just know that the hospital never truly feels empty at night.